In New York, Dan excels as a car salesman, earning the title of Salesman of the Month once again, thanks to his keen eye for detail. He enjoys a simple, peaceful, low-key lifestyle and anticipates celebrating his anniversary with a special getaway alongside his wife, Jessica. The couple has 3 children, Nina, Kyle, and the youngest, Max. Nina and Kyle frequently clash, causing stress in the household. Dan is particularly frustrated with Kyle's constant gaming and urges him to spend more time outdoors, while Nina's desire to change college majors due to her boyfriend's influence adds to his concerns. Despite Dan's efforts to offer guidance, his words fall on deaf ears. Kyle cleverly maintains a secret streaming setup at a friend's house to continue gaming undisturbed, while Nina, asserting her independence, sees herself as an adult beyond her father's advice. Meanwhile, the parents look forward to their annual tradition of attending a carnival, but Jessica longs for more excitement and spontaneity in their lives beyond their usual routines. After enjoying a roller coaster ride, Dan promises to inject more unpredictability into their future outings. Their intimate moment is abruptly interrupted when someone intentionally snaps a photo of them kissing. This invasion of privacy escalates as the individual taunts Dan, posting the image online and challenging him to react. The situation worsens when the man spills his slushie on Dan and insults Jessica, calling her names. Despite the provocation and disrespect, Dan chooses to walk away, refusing to engage in violence. Jessica, though relieved that Dan didn't fight back, feels internally disappointed in her husband. Back at home, Dan struggles with holding back his emotions, unable to shake off the confrontation. Meanwhile, Jessica finds solace in boxing, where an accidental punch to her sparring partner leads to an unexpected friendship with Gwen, a fellow enthusiast and travel agent. Opening up to Gwen, Jessica confides her feelings of being trapped in their current life. While she values Dan as a husband and father, she's frustrated by his contentment with their status quo. During a shopping trip with Max, Dan notices a suspicious man seemingly observing him. Acting cautiously, Dan quickly reacts when the man makes a threatening move. With Max by his side, Dan skillfully fends off the attacker, surprising the locals with his abilities. Back at home, Dan reveals a secret compartment containing guns, outdated passports, and cash, alarming Jessica. Concerned for their safety, Dan contacts Augie, a former associate, to arrange new identities for their family, hinting at the danger they may be facing. Augie suspects that the threat originates from Dan's former employer, McCaffrey, and urges Dan to disappear immediately. It turns out that Dan is a former assassin, a fact he has kept hidden from his family. McCaffrey likely discovered his identity because of the photo taken at the carnival. Seeking answers, Dan goes to find Nina at an editorial meeting only to learn that she quit 3 months ago. With a little persuasion, Nina's friend reveals her whereabouts, and Dan finds Nina under the bleachers, upset about abandoning her dream. However, they must quickly shift focus to picking up her brother from the chess club. Disappointed to find his son at the neighbor's house immersed in gaming, Dan remains cautious. Taking matters into his own hands, Dan informs his children that they're heading to Vegas. Despite Jessica's initial reluctance due to work commitments, Dan convinces her to embrace spontaneity and join the trip. Excited at the prospect, Jessica agrees. However, as they prepare to leave, they encounter McCaffrey's men waiting in the parking lot. Swiftly assessing the situation, Dan steers the bus through the streets, skillfully evading their pursuers as they race towards safety. Shortly afterward, the pursuers catch up to Dan, but he skillfully navigates the situation without arousing suspicion from his family. Evading trackers becomes considerably challenging when you're being monitored by satellite surveillance. Upon arriving at his workplace, Dan swiftly shuts the gates behind him, effectively blocking the pursuers. Utilizing his expertise, he lifts the car and locates the tracking device just in time to evade detection. Concealed from view, Dan manages to remain undetected as the pursuers pass by. Meanwhile, his family remains unaware of the danger looming over them. Dan cleverly transfers the tracker to a colleague's car and instructs them to take a drive on the highway, successfully diverting the attention of the pursuers. With 33 hours left on the clock, Dan's wife and kids excitedly share updates about their trip on social media. To maintain anonymity, Dan confiscates everyone's phones, ensuring a device-free journey. However, a new challenge arises as they realize they lack directions to their destination. Seeking assistance at a travel agency, Dan persuades the clerk to provide them with maps for their road trip, facilitating their journey. As the family bonds during their trip, McCaffrey personally surveils Dan's house, confident that his family remains oblivious to the danger they're in. Meanwhile, Kyle's burgeoning popularity as a streamer attracts attention from a stranger seeking a photo. Recognizing the potential threat, Dan intervenes and decides to continue driving to avoid detection, knowing that McCaffrey's men are closing in. While his family slumbers peacefully, Dan orchestrates a cunning plan, activating music on their headphones to mask the impending chaos. Preparing to employ lethal force, he faces an onslaught of attackers. Despite his mirror being shot, Dan skillfully eliminates one assailant, narrowly avoiding a collision and dispatching another threat. Remarkably, amidst the chaos, his family remains undisturbed, deep in their slumber. After a relentless night of evasive maneuvers, Dan finally succumbs to exhaustion, but his family is wide awake. As they approach the college campus Nina yearns to attend, she persuades her family to make a detour. Enthralled by the vibrant festivities, even Jessica showcases her keg stand prowess, much to Nina's admiration. Nina's desire to visit the campus is partly fueled by her boyfriend, Trevor, who attends the college. During a campus tour, Dan's suspicion is aroused by a German man, whom he suspects to be affiliated with McCaffrey. However, his attention is diverted when he is unexpectedly attacked by another assailant. Engaging in a fierce confrontation within the chemistry lab, Dan emerges victorious, reuniting with his family to resume their journey. Meanwhile, Nina's visit takes a heartbreaking turn when she discovers Trevor's infidelity. In a poignant moment of empowerment, Dan imparts martial arts wisdom to Nina, helping her find solace and reinforcing her appreciation for family bonds. As they continue their journey, the family's connection deepens, and Nina expresses gratitude to Dan for his unwavering support, contemplating a return to her editorial role at school. At a quaint motel, Jessica and Dan finally have a chance to unwind and enjoy each other's company. Jessica notices a newfound spontaneity in Dan, sensing that something has shifted within him. Meanwhile, Dan contacts Augie, who is en route to deliver their new identities, yet Dan hasn't broached the subject with his family. Sneakily returning the phone he had borrowed, Dan braces himself for the impending conversation. In a heart-to-heart with Kyle, Dan finally addresses Kyle's streaming hobby, acknowledging his son's remarkable skill level akin to a professional. To settle the debate, they engage in a friendly laser tag competition, betting on the outcome. With Dan's formidable expertise, he secures victory, strengthening the bond between father and son. Upon their arrival in Las Vegas, the family settles into one of the city's luxurious suites. Prior to dinner, Dan meets with Augie to receive their new identities and flight details to Vancouver, all part of a lucrative deal. Dan resolves to disclose the truth to Jessica during their romantic dinner, while entrusting the children to babysit Max, albeit with strict instructions not to leave the suite. Meanwhile, McCaffrey's operatives are hot on their trail. Kyle, renowned in the gaming world, visits the HyperX gaming arena, where he crosses paths with Valkyrie and earns a spot on her team for the Valorant finals. However, their presence does not go unnoticed by McCaffrey's men, casting a shadow of danger over their excursion. As Nina bonds with one of the gamers who graciously gave up his spot for Kyle, Kyle himself proves his prowess by single-handedly dominating the enemy team. Amidst the gaming frenzy, Dan attempts to divulge the truth to Jessica, only to be repeatedly interrupted. Opting to delay the conversation, Dan suggests they indulge in some gambling. However, a nagging worry prompts him to check on the kids, but his calls remain unanswered. Returning to their suite, Jessica is reassured by strategically placed dummies, believing the children to be asleep. As Jessica retreats to freshen up, setting the stage for a romantic evening, McCaffrey's men launch a sudden attack. Thinking quickly, Dan utilizes vodka to ignite and incapacitate the assailants, but Jessica is taken hostage in the chaos. Putting down his firearm, Dan covertly arms himself with a knife. During a call from one of the assailants, Jessica overhears Dan being addressed as Sean, leading to a startling revelation. Seizing an opportunity, Dan dispatches the attacker, prompting Jessica to search for the children, only to find the dummies. Realizing they must be at HyperX, where Kyle had been fixated, they rush to the gaming arena. However, upon their arrival, Dan reveals his dark past as a covert assassin working for McCaffrey, elucidating his aversion to leaving the city and social media. Kyle, feeling betrayed, struggles to reconcile his image of his father with this newfound information. As their discussion unfolds, they come under attack, forcing Dan to demonstrate his lethal skills once again. With tensions high and danger lurking, the family must confront the grim reality of Dan's past and the imminent threat posed by McCaffrey's mercenaries. He hands over their new identities, Nina becomes Molly, and Kyle takes on the name Van, reminiscent of a vehicle. After 18 years of deceit, the family adamantly rejects him. Jessica decides to leave, taking responsibility for the children. She reaches out to Gwen for assistance, leaving Dan to stand guard outside until morning. Despite Dan's warnings about the danger and McCaffrey's inevitable pursuit, Jessica insists he ensure their safety and stay away. Upon Jessica's arrival, it becomes apparent that Gwen holds considerable influence, raising suspicions about her potential collaboration with McCaffrey. Suddenly, Gwen shares a story about her ex, who craftily deceived another woman, suggesting Jessica has fallen victim to a similar scheme. McCaffrey's unexpected appearance confirms the trap. McCaffrey contacts Dan, revealing he has captured his family. He sets up a meeting at an abandoned hotel, surrounded by his henchmen. Arriving at the penthouse, McCaffrey mockingly asks for a hug, dropping a bombshell: he's Dan's father. McCaffrey's motive for wanting Dan dead stems from feeling abandoned, yet he now expresses a desire to reconcile. The plot twists just keep coming. McCaffrey presents Dan with a chilling ultimatum: return to working for him and his family will be spared. Refuse, and they face certain death. Left with no choice, Dan reluctantly agrees. Suddenly, the kids, fueled by newfound moral convictions, urge Jessica to protect Dan, despite their recent desire to sever ties with him. In a childish act of rebellion, Kyle begins pushing elevator buttons, while the kids passionately advocate for Dan's safety. Amidst the chaos, Jessica, with baby Max in tow, uses a diaper to blindside one of the assailants, sending him plummeting to his demise. Determined to rescue their father, they spring into action. As McCaffrey steps away to attend to matters, Gwen attempts to seduce Dan, leveraging her charm while disregarding the tech guy. Unfazed by her advances, Dan remains focused on the task at hand. With the family rallying behind him, they stage a rescue mission. While Dan incapacitates Gwen, the tech guy falls into their hands. Dan takes a moment to apologize to Jessica for his past secrecy, vowing to always be truthful and committed to their family. Meanwhile, McCaffrey begins to suspect that something is amiss. It's worth noting that the tech guy happens to be Kyle's fan, adding an unexpected twist to the unfolding drama. Kyle tests out the drone and discovers that Dan is surprisingly adept with technology. As the henchmen approach, Dan instructs his family to head to the roof while he handles the situation, with Kyle acting as his eyes and ears using the drone. Utilizing the drone, Kyle spots McCaffrey's men and relays crucial information to Dan, who skillfully navigates the encounter despite being outnumbered. McCaffrey, realizing the drone's role, awakens Gwen to track down the family. Dan urges his father to call off the attack, but McCaffrey disregards his plea, leading to a firefight where Dan miraculously evades gunfire from multiple assailants. Meanwhile, Jessica, anticipating trouble, positions herself to defend the kids, but Gwen, confident in her combat abilities, confronts her directly. With Kyle providing intel, Dan systematically takes down McCaffrey's men one by one, despite their poor marksmanship. However, McCaffrey finally shoots down the drone. In a brutal showdown, Gwen emerges victorious, trapping Jessica under debris. As McCaffrey gains the upper hand over Dan, Jessica summons her last ounce of strength to free herself, but Gwen overwhelms her. With determination, Jessica seizes a bamboo stick, attempting a bold maneuver to subdue Gwen, but fails. However, in a surprising turn, she manages to hurl the stick, fatally striking Gwen. Just as McCaffrey prepares to deliver the final blow to Dan, the family intervenes. Nina expresses their love and forgiveness, emphasizing the importance of family, even including him as her grandfather. This distraction allows Dan to turn the tables. In the aftermath, the family reunites, and the authorities arrive to apprehend McCaffrey's men. 6 months later, Nina thrives as a respected journalist, Dan runs a security firm, Jessica becomes a coach, and Kyle continues his streaming career. Together, they embark on a cross-country road trip to Stanford, marking a new chapter in their lives. The end.